In 2024, the Australia Institute's bringing some of the world's greatest thinkers to Australia to help celebrate our 30th anniversary. We're delighted to announce that Jose Ramos Horta, President of Timor-Leste and Nobel Peace Laureate, will be our guest in October. President Ramos Horta will be speaking at the Sydney Opera House on Tuesday the 8th of October at 6 p.m, 25 years on from Timor-Leste's historic vote for independence. Tickets are on sale now from the Sydney Opera House or via the link in the episode description.
Hello and welcome to Dollars and Cents, the podcast where we take the con out of the economy. I'm here with Greg Jericho, our chief economist and the star of Dollars and Cents. How are you, Greg?
I'm very good, Hayden. I'm glad we're taking the con out of the economy. Very nice.
Great. Now, last week, the Environment Minister, Tanya Plibersek, approved 3 new coal mines or extensions to existing coal mines, which is kind of just as bad. Doesn't really matter if it's a new hole or an old hole. It's still more coal.
450 hectares of koala habitat, equivalent to about 230 MCGs, will be cleared to make way for one of 3 coal mine expansions approved by the Environment Minister.
Rallying against the federal government's decision to extend the life of 2 thermal coal mines in the Hunter Valley and one in northern New South Wales, which also produces coal used in metal production.
We've got every leading scientist and expert in the world telling us that the only way to stop these extreme weather events and to make sure that we've got a planet that's safe for our children is to stop burning fossil fuels. And yet here we are with the government making decisions like this.
Now, I don't think we have to explain to everyone that coal is bad for emissions, but your column this week, Greg, talks about a different angle of why these coal mines are so bad for our economy.
Yeah, I mean, you're quite right. We all know emissions are causing climate change, and it's pretty drastic at the moment. Some of the things that we're seeing, not just on a global sense, where we're, for example, breaking records for global temperatures 15 months in a row, which is fairly is starting to be a trend, shall we say? Seeing massive hurricanes over in America that kind of doing a bit of a lie to the once in 100-year kind of storm because they keep cropping up every other year.
Yeah, they've been bad.
Yeah.
And how about, before we get into it, do you want to just tell me why? Maybe you can jump into the minister's head and say, why is Tanya approving these coal mines? Do we need more coal, Greg?
No, we don't need more coal. We certainly don't need more thermal coal. And that's one of the big problems with these approvals is, yes, there is a small case to be made for metallurgical coal, which goes into making steel. Yes, green steel is on its way, and we should be doing everything we can to hurry that along with technology and investment. But metallurgical coal is the least bad sort of coal. It's not going into coal-fired power stations. It's just making steel. Whereas thermal coal is literally just being shipped, dug out of the ground to then be burnt and to produce energy, produce electricity. It really is kind of the lowest hanging fruit when it comes to sort of banning or, ending fossil fuel production. I mean, it's coal, gas, and, yes, we want less gas as well. It's not a transition fuel, but coal is just such a no-brainer, and yet the government keeps approving them. And the justification from Tanya Plibersek is, I've followed this mine has passed all the conditions in the acts and everything for approval, and it's fine, and I've got no reason to reject its approval. And the reason is because the government is ensuring that they don't change the law so that they would have an opportunity to reject it.
Yeah, she's the one responsible for those laws.
Yeah, in effect, they're saying, the laws that were set up by John Howard and altered by Tony Abbott, they're good, And also they're relying on this furphy of the safeguard mechanism where all the work has been done in the title. Her argument is that, this won't actually increase emissions because it'll all come under the safeguard mechanism. And under the safeguard mechanism, companies that pollute massive amounts have to actually keep their total emissions under a certain amount. And you wonder how can you do that when you're increasing emissions from new coal mines? It's like, they can offset their emissions. They can buy their way out of it. And
which we all know doesn't really work.
yeah, our we've here at the Oz Institute have done some really good work led by Polly Hemming on just how dodgy offsets are.
The research suggests climate and energy policy has directed investment away from renewables and towards carbon offsets, which have doubled in the last 2 years.
They don't have to reduce their emissions. They can purchase carbon offsets instead. And carbon offsets are relatively cheap.
So in other words, I'm not going to reduce my emissions. I'm just going to buy a emission reduction from somebody else who's reduced their emissions, who sold it to me. So in other words, I want to lose weight, but I'm not going to. I'm going to buy weight loss from some fit, skinny teenager.
Yeah. Heck, I could own a private jet, 8 cars and eat 7 steaks a day, and theoretically I could call myself carbon neutral if I wanted to.
People, when they think, oh, carbon offset, that's someone out there planting trees. And that's most often the case, not what's happening. What's happening is someone is pledging not to cut down trees, which you might think, oh, well, that's at least good. But actually, they were never even intending to cut down these trees.
Yeah, those
and yet there's a claim of, oh, I've bought an offset because someone's not going to cut down the trees that they were never going to cut down. And so we're reducing emissions. Like, yeah, no, you're not. And there's even some worse practices going on. But the upshot is the only demand for carbon offsets are people or companies who are producing emissions. And if you've got a system where our research has shown that about 1.3 billion tons of CO2 is going to be emitted from these 3 new coal mine expansions, if you've got a situation where companies are like, oh, we've got this safeguard mechanism where we have to keep our emissions down and we'll have to pay to offset any increase in emissions, and you've got proposals where there's 1.3 billion, they're going, yeah, that's still, we can make a profit out of that. It's the sense that actually it's not really a deterrent. All it's done is put a price on emissions that companies are willing to pay.
Yeah, and you sort of touched on the integrity issues of offsets, which have been widely documented. But even when they do have integrity, as you said, like the best case scenario is they're still being used to justify new emissions that are going straight into the environment. So it's a lose-lose.
Yeah, if you were actually reducing your emissions, you wouldn't need your offsets. And instead, what we've got is the government not actually committed to reducing emissions through saying, no more thermal coal mines.
The easy thing, as you said.
The actual obvious thing of, if you want to reduce emissions, well, reduce emissions. No, they're saying, oh, you can increase emissions, but you got to buy a lot more of these offsets. And it's like, the maths doesn't work. So bad all round. But the point I was and this is what you were alluding to, is it's not just bad for the environment and bad for our emissions, which are actually have been rising under this government. It's actually bad for the economy, especially in a key part of it that we on this pod have been talking about a lot, and that's housing.
Yeah, so your column looked at where the workers are, in particular construction workers, and there was a really interesting graph that sort of broke down all the different sort of engineering jobs in the country. And dear listeners at home, would you like to ponder perhaps what number 1 is? Have a second. And then, Greg, tell us.
Yeah, basically, when you look at what all the work has been done in the construction industry, it's mainly in gas, coal, mining. And why this is important and why this is relevant with this decision is we don't have an infinite supply of construction workers. And in fact, right now, if you're a construction worker, life is pretty good. It's easier to get a job now than it's ever been. It's easier to get a job as a construction worker than during the mining boom of 2005 to 2010. Right now, there are about not even 1.5 construction workers who are unemployed per job vacancy in the construction industry. So basically that means if there's a job in the construction industry, there's a good chance you're really only going to be the one person applying. Things are really tough to get construction workers. And in terms of not just construction workers, but the amount of resources and equipment, it's a finite thing. And so if you expand one thing, you have to reduce work being done elsewhere. And a good way to think about it is, and this is in the graph that I was alluding to. Basically, there's a few categories of what construction work is. There's public works, so that's building roads, that's building, public hospitals and things like that. Then there is non-residential buildings that are private sector, so building a factory or things like that. Then there is building residences, housing, and then there's sort of that private sector construction engineering work, which we're basically saying is mining and a fair bit of stuff in electricity generation and distribution things. They're basically the splits. Now, most of the time, the share of work being done on non-residential buildings, on public sector works, basically makes up about half of all the work being done, plus a few alterations and extensions of housing things. Not new housing, just doing, putting on a patio and things
so sort of
that.
like broadly industrial uses is about
broadly
half.
Industrial and sort of public infrastructure, building roads and things like that is half. Now, back before the mining boom, the rest of the other half, about 35% of it was building homes, 15% was that private sector engineering work, construction, mines and things like that. Now it's about 25-25. So the increase in work being done in the mining sector hasn't really taken away from, non-residential buildings, hasn't taken too much away from public sector works and infrastructure. Where it's really taken the workers from and all the resources is from the private sector building homes part of the industry.
And anyone who's been sort of following the housing crisis recently would have heard that a lot, like that it's been really hard to get the construction workers in. Anyone who's perhaps been doing some renovations or building a home, like those construction costs have been going through the roof. And are you saying that part of that reason is because of these new mining projects that keep coming on board and pulling those workers away from sort of other projects that they could be working on?
Yeah, I mean, it's not just it's a big part, because when you have an economy where there is a high level of unemployment, or a sort of average level of unemployment, like let's say unemployment's at about 5% to 6%. Yeah, you can see governments going, oh, we're approving this mining project and it's going to create jobs and, it's going to be really good for the economy. As I say, we're at the moment, the unemployment rate for construction workers has been under 3% for 3 or 4 years now.
And what is it for the broader economy?
The broader economy is about 4.2 or around there. And as I was saying, fewer than 2 people per job vacancy in the construction industry. It's basically full employment. You want a job, there's pretty much one there. Yes, you might have to travel and things like that, and not all the jobs will be of equal greatness. But basically, if you're a construction worker, it's pretty easy to get a job. So in that instance, like we are now, when you're approving new coal mines, you're not saying, oh, we're creating jobs and this is going to be good for people who can get off unemployment and get a job. What it's actually saying is, those people who are working, building homes, we want them to stop doing that and go build a fossil fuel project, go build a coal mine.
Mm.
And that means the people who are wanting to build homes, remember, the government wants to build basically 1 million homes in 5 years. That's their big sort of target. Well, who's going to build that? Someone's got to build them. And if those people it's not a case of we've got construction workers standing around waiting, geez, I wish there was some work. There's plenty of work. And what Tanya Plibersek essentially did last week when she approved these 3 coal mines is saying, I've created some more work that's got to come from somewhere. Those companies are going to pay those workers a fair bit because coal mining, there's a lot more profit there than perhaps building a home or building an apartment block. And so those workers will be taken from the residential construction to building fossil fuel mining construction, which means you are there wanting to build a home. You've just been told, oh, you're going to have to wait another year, or, the wait time's more. And also, the cost is actually going to be increased because we got to pay our workers more to try and keep them here. So the cost of building your home has gone up, which means people going, oh, I can't afford to do that now, I'll put it off. It's what we call crowding out, in a sense. It's crowding out is often talked about in terms of the government. Oh, the government's doing a lot of investment, doing a lot of building, and so it's taking workers away from the private sector. Well, what we have here is the fossil fuel sector essentially crowding out the home building sector. It's taking the space away from the residential building sector, and so you're basically left with bugger all to deal with.
Yeah, and that's shown by that graph that you talked about earlier. And I'd encourage everyone to go and see Greg's latest column that shows that the changes in the percentage of construction is from it's an increase in mining and a decrease in residential housing. But also, I think what a lot of people might say to that is they'll point out that the mining jobs are in the regional areas and a lot of the houses and apartments that are being built are in the cities. What would you say to that, Greg?
Well, the jobs might be there, but the people living there aren't there. I mean, these are a lot of fly-in, fly-out workers. And also think about it in terms of, I guess, the opportunity cost. When you choose to approve something like the mines, there's a cost to it. And that cost is what else I could have been doing. Let's say we've got a set amount of workers. We can either decide to have them go work in mines, but if they don't do that, what is the cost to us in terms of what else they could have been doing? There's an opportunity cost. And when you've got full employment, that is a very acute decision because you're taking these workers away from working where the people are, where people live, sending them off to go work in a coal mine that they're not going to take their families there. There's no infrastructure. Some of them are near populated areas, but a lot of them aren't. And a lot of them are fly-in, fly-out workers. These are not generating much returns to the economy in the sense of generating the sense of community or even sort of the infrastructure around the mine. It's just there to build this mine, dig stuff up, ship it off. Profits, a lot of it going overseas because a vast majority of mining companies, especially in coal as well, are foreign owned. And it's a case of the mine then gets used up and we're left with a big hole in the ground, a hell of a lot of emissions in the air, and people going, yeah, and we've got this massive housing problem. Why have we got a housing problem? It's like, well, what did you choose to do? It's often justified, the terrible line of, mining. Oh, no, we need mining. It's the backbone of the economy. And as we always say, economies don't actually have backbones. There's plenty of economies around that are not dominated by one industry. And the reality is also when you look at Australia's economy, it's not dominated by one industry. We're not dominated by the mining industry.
So you sort of mentioned the benefits to the economy there. And as you said, like a lot of the talking points that are rolled out are about the jobs and how great these jobs are for the economy. But you did a bit of analysis recently comparing mining to the hospitality industry. And what did you find?
Yeah, I mean, we often hear that the mining industry is big, and there's this perception, I think, that people think, it's a hell of a lot bigger than it is. It's about, and listeners would have heard us talk about GDP, that's basically everything in the economy. Mining makes up about 10% of that, which, yeah, it's a big chunk, not the biggest chunk. Health certainly is bigger, construction's even bigger. But when you look at, okay, what is that 10%? Most of it is profits. Most of the mining industry sort of income that it's generating is company profits. And what people don't realize is that the mining industry makes up, it's 10% of the size of the economy, but it only employs about 2% of all Australian workers. And so what I thought I'd just have a look at in the national accounts, we actually can find out how much wages are paid by each industry. And we find that actually in the sort of the last year, both the hospitality industry, so that's accommodation and food services, so basically hotels, restaurants, motels, things like that, and the mining industry both paid about $43 billion in wages. So you think, okay, they're basically the same size. But no, the reason why the mining sector is bigger is because the hospitality industry made about $14 billion in profits. The mining industry made $253 billion in profits. So when we talk about the size of the economy and, the mining industry is the backbone, what we're really talking about is their profits, not actually how much they're giving to households. Now, yes, mining industry pay higher wages So that's great. But in terms of the impact on the overall economy, in terms of wages, hotels and restaurants are pretty much exactly the same. But
Yeah, wow.
what we're doing is focusing on their profits, and people go, oh, yeah, but they pay all the taxes. And it's like, do they? The mining, most of those profits go overseas, especially in gas, coal. Iron ore is not too bad. But even in terms of that, when we think, you often hear these talks, oh, we need all those coal exports. When a coal company exports coal to India or wherever, I don't get a check. we don't all get a share of that.
I'm still waiting for mine in the mail.
All we get is some of the money that is taxed on those profits that they get from those exports. And the reality is we don't get much of it. Mining all up, including state and federal taxes, maybe account for 6% of all taxes. Coal mining, a very small margin of that.
Yeah, it's less than 2%.
Yeah, gas is even worse. Gas is bugger all because they're very good at avoiding tax, avoiding paying royalties. At least coal has to pay royalties. So does iron ore. Gas barely does. And so what we've got is this situation where we have this lie, essentially, that, mining is crucial. If we didn't have mining, Australia's economy would be stuffed. And it's like, well, in terms of wages, no. We would just as easily say we'd be stuffed if the hospitality industry fell over. We'd be a hell of a lot more stuffed if education and health and construction, if even manufacturing, because they employ more workers. Really what we're talking about is, we need all those company profits. And it's like, yeah, but they're not coming into our economy. A lot of yes, they will come into the economy in a sense of, yes, we count them, but are they actually benefiting us? Well, yes, the tax that we get of those profits is. And so if that's what you think is good, it sounds to me like you're arguing we should tax them a bit more because we sure as heck should.
Yeah. And for me, like that graph that you described, like the profits of mining and hospitality, it so clearly articulates the problem with like holding up GDP as like this symbol of our economy's health. Because at the end of the day, it's just numbers on a spreadsheet.
Yeah.
Like if we sell $1 billion of coal, it gets wrote down on the spreadsheet, even if most of that is just profits that go to some rich coal executive.
Yeah, and we hear about, if you buy shares and you get the dividends from their profits and everything, again, who's getting those? We can actually look at this from the tax stats, the annual taxation statistics from the ATO. Millionaires, people who earn more than $1 million a year, make up about 0.2% of all taxpayers. They got a quarter of all the dividends.
Yeah, wow.
So 25%, a quarter of all the shared profit dividends are going to 0.2%, massively geared towards the wealthy. So again, we're saying, the mining industry and is the backbone of this country. It brings in profits. It's like, yeah, profits that are going overseas, and if they're here, they're kind of staying in the hands of the very wealthy, who we're not taxing very well because they're claiming that as a capital gain, or it's an unrealized capital gain. We're not even taxing that. It's all a bit dodgy. So we end up with this situation where Tanya Plibersek and the government not wanting to do anything to change how environmental approvals are for coal mines, not wanting to put in a climate change trigger where they could say, yeah, it passes all the environmental things, it's not going to cause any extinctions or anything, but this is bad for climate change. They're not willing to do that. They are approving these mines, which will take workers away from areas that desperately need them to solve actual social problems to do with housing, which is a massive social problem. Instead, they are preferencing these industries who make massive profits, aren't well taxed, and are not delivering much benefit to the economy.
Yeah. So just to sum up, these enormous profits of coal mining in particular, show that we could tax them a lot heavier. And if that makes the economic case a little bit less viable so that we stop approving so many new ones, well, great. The environment and the climate will thank us for it. And then we'll have all these workers who are free to build more houses or other projects.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like the profits from coal mining are helping people afford to buy houses. Mining is not making us richer. It makes it sound like we're richer.
Mm.
You know, maybe it helped the government have a budget surplus this year, but, you know, so what? You can't eat surplus.
Mm.
You know, surplus isn't putting a roof over your head. And again, most of the taxes are coming actually from workers who are not in mining. Most of the company tax are coming from areas that are not mining. Mining is not the backbone of the economy. There is no backbone. Economies are fluid. People work in different areas of the economy, do different things. They're all vital. But we sure as heck know which ones are harming the planet.
Mm.
And that's fossil fuel mining. That's thermal coal. Maybe stop doing that. And it's not like you're going to have a whole stack of workers unemployed. No, there's plenty of work. There's plenty of demand for construction. I would argue, and I think it'd be hard not to argue, that actually building more homes, building more public infrastructure would actually be better for society than building a new fossil fuel mine.
So what I'm hearing is how mining works in the economy in terms of being something that overwhelmingly benefits the richest. It's kind of how our housing system works.
Yeah, I mean, you know, when I talk about who's benefiting from the dividends, it's very similar to who's benefiting from the capital gains tax discount, basically because a lot of those dividends are sort of in line with people who are making lots of capital gains.
Yeah, as a function of our housing system being really friendly to investors and encouraging people to buy up as many houses as they can and rent them out for profit.
Yeah, so we've got this wonderful situation where we've got a housing policy that is benefiting the richest, and we are exacerbating that problem by approving coal mines who are benefiting the richest. And people wondering, why have we got housing affordability problems? Well, look at the choices that have been made by governments. Look at the cost of those choices, and you kind of start quickly arriving at a conclusion that this is not an accident. This didn't just happen through the market, invisible hand doing things. Government has made choices, and right now the choices they're making are all making it harder for people to afford homes.
Yeah, and making inequality worse.
And also killing the planet. So, yeah, not a lot of positives here.
On that cheery note, I think that's all we've got time for today. And if you'd want to know more about the coal mines that are on the cards, because there's a whole bunch more that are waiting for approval that could be approved. They're all listed on the Australia Institute's coal mine tracker, as well as like how big they are and how many emissions. So that's a wonderful resource that the team has put together here. So I'd encourage everyone to go and check that out.
Yeah, it really is quite astonishing just how many mines are all in train to be approved. And at the moment, the government is doing nothing that would prevent them being approved. It's just sort of saying, please jump over these hurdles, and the hurdles are about an inch off the ground. So,
yes.
Yeah, but on that cheery note, we've got to stop ending on these really depressing notes. But thank you, everyone, for listening. We'll be back again next week with another Dollars and Cents. This episode of Dollars and Cents was recorded on the 3rd of October, and some things may have changed. Unfortunately, I don't think the approval of the 3 new coal mine extensions will have changed. But you can find my column, Grogonomics, which looks at all the opportunity costs and what's happening with mining and the construction industry on the Guardian Australia site. And as Hayden said, for more research, especially on coal mines and basically how the mining industry is taking us all for fools, go to our website, which is at australiainstitute.org.au. My Twitter handle and the handle I use for all social media is at Grog's Gamut, and Hayden's is?
Yeah, I'm at Hayden the Star, and it's been great filling in for Eleanor on the podcast while she's been away. I'm normally behind the social media accounts of the Institute, so if you leave spiteful comments, I'm going to see them and then feel sad. So be nice on socials.
Be nice to Hayden. Be nice to Hayden. And I think Hayden's going to be back next week. Because Eleanor is away again. Eleanor, where are you? Come back.
Yeah, the boys.
Yeah, but break up the bro pod. Yeah, we need another bro pod, especially talking economics. But we will be back next week. Our theme music, as always, is from Blue Dot Sessions. Have a great week, and we'll see you all next week.
Bye-bye.